24, Las Vegas, Nevada. The Texan in the yellow Dayglow polyester pants would not have tried to get Georgia Monatella into bed if he had known she was in the mood to castrate someone. Although it was the afternoon of December 24, Georgia Jorge was not yet in the Christmas spirit. Usually even-tempered and easygoing, she was in an exceedingly sour state of mind as she strode back and forth through the casino, from the bar to the blackjack tables and back to the bar again, delivering drinks to the gamblers. For one thing, she hated her job. Being a cocktail waitress was bad enough in a regular bar or lounge, but in a hotel casino bigger than a football field, it was a killer. At the end of a shift, her feet ached and often her ankles were swollen. The hours were irregular, too. How were you supposed to provide a stable home for a 7-year-old daughter when you did not have a job with normal hours? She also hated the costume, a little red nothing, cut high in the crotch and hips, very low at the bust line, smaller than a bathing suit. An elastic corset was built in to minimize the waistline and emphasize the breasts. If you were already small-waisted with generous breasts, as Jorge was, the get-up made you look almost freakishly erotic. And she hated the way the pit bosses and casino floor men were always hitting on her. Maybe they figured any girl who would strut her stuff in an outfit like that was an easy lay. She was sure her name had something to do with their attitude as well. Jorge. It was cute. Too cute. Her mother must have been drunk when she got creative with the spelling of Georgia. Oh, I guess. It's not Jorge, it's Georgia. It was alright when people heard it because they had no way of knowing she spelled it cute, but she had to wear a name tag on her costume, Jorja, and at least a dozen people a day commented on it. It was a frivolous name misspelled like that, so it gave them the idea she was a frivolous person. She considered going to court to have the proper spelling made legal, but that would hurt her mother. However, if guys at work kept hitting on her, she might even have it changed to Mother Teresa, which ought to cool off some of the horny bastards. And fending off the bosses was not the worst of it. Every week, some high roller, a big shot from Detroit or LA or Dallas, dropping a bundle at the tables, would take a shine to Georgia and ask the pit boss to fix him up with her. A few cocktail waitresses were available, not many, but a few. But when the pit bosses approached Georgia, her answer was always the same: to hell with them. I'm a waitress, not a hooker. Her routine cold refusal did not stop them from pressuring her to relent, which they had done an hour ago. A wart-faced, bug-eyed oil man from Houston, in phosphorescent yellow pants, a blue shirt, and a red string tie, one of the hotel's favorite clients, had gotten the hots for her and had made inquiries. His breath stank of the burritos he'd eaten for lunch. Now the bosses were angry with her for refusing a highly valued customer for being too stuffy. Rainey Tarnell, the blackjack pit boss on the day shift, had the gall to put it just like that. Honey, don't be so stuffy. As if falling on her back and spreading her legs for a stranger from Houston was merely the equivalent of a fashion gaucherie, like wearing white shoes, either before Memorial Day or after Labor Day. Though she hated being a casino cocktail waitress, she could not afford to quit. No other job would pay her as well. She was a divorced mother raising a daughter without benefit of child support payments, and in order to protect her credit rating, she was still paying off bills that Alan had run up in her name before walking out on her, so she was acutely aware of the value of $1. Her wages were low, but the tips were exceedingly good, especially on those occasions when one of her customers started winning big at cards or dice. On this day before Christmas, the casino was 2/3 empty and tips were bad. Vegas was always slow Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the crowds did not return until December 26th. The whizzing, rattling, ringing of slot machines was muted. Many of the blackjack dealers stood idle and bored in front of empty tables. No wonder I'm in a sour mood, Georgia thought. Sore feet, back pain. A horny creep who figures I ought to be available as the drinks I serve. An argument with Rainey Tarnell, and no tips to show for it. When her shift ended at 4 o'clock, she hurried to the changing room downstairs, punched the time clock, slipped out of her costume and into street clothes, and was out the door into the employee parking lot with a speed that would have drawn praise from an Olympic runner. The unpredictable desert weather did nothing to instill the Christmas spirit in her. A Las Vegas winter day could be cold, with bone-numbing wind, or it could be warm enough for shorts and halters. This year, the holiday was warm. Her dusty, battered Chevette started on only the third try, which should have improved her mood. But listening to the starter grind and the engine cough, she was reminded of the shiny new Buick that Alan had taken with him 15 months ago, when he had abandoned her and Marcy. Alan Rykoff. More than her job, more than any of the other things that irritated her, Alan was the cause of Georgia's foul mood. She had shed his name when the marriage had been dissolved, reverting to her maiden name, Monatella, but she could not as easily shed the memories of the pain he had inflicted on her and Marcy. As she drove out of the parking lot into the street behind the hotel, Georgia tried to banish Alan from her thoughts, but he remained at center stage. The bastard. With his current bedmate, an airhead blonde bearing the unlikely name Pepper, he had flown off to Acapulco for a week, not even bothering to leave a Christmas gift for Marcy. What did you tell a 7-year-old girl when she asked why her daddy didn't buy her anything for Christmas, or even come to see her? Although Alan left Georgia saddled with bills, she had willingly forgone alimony because by then she loathed him so much that she had not wanted to be dependent on him. However, she had gone after child support and had been shocked when he countered by insisting Marcy was not his child and therefore not his responsibility. Damn him. Georgia had married him when she was 19 and he was 24, and she'd never been unfaithful. Alan knew she hadn't cheated, but protecting his jazzy lifestyle, he needed every dollar for clothes, fast cars, and women, was more important to him than his wife's reputation or his daughter's happiness. To spare little Marcy humiliation and pain, Georgia had released Alan from responsibility before he could voice his sleazy accusations in the courtroom. So she was finished with him. She could put him out of her mind. But as she drove past the mall at the intersection of Maryland Parkway and Desert Inn Road, Georgia thought about how young she had been when she tied herself to Alan, too young for marriage and too naive to see through his facade. When she was 19, she thought he was très sophisticated, charming. For more than a year, their union had seemed blissful, but gradually she began to see him for what he was: shallow, vain, lazy, a shockingly promiscuous womanizer. The summer before last, when their relationship had been rocky, she had tried to salvage the marriage by coercing Alan into a carefully planned 3-week vacation. She believed that part of their problem was that they spent too little time together. He was a baccarat dealer in one hotel, and she was employed in another, and they frequently worked different shifts, slept on different schedules. Just the two of them and Marcy embarking upon an adventurous 3-week car trip seemed a good way to repair their damaged relationship. Unfortunately, but predictably, her scheme had not worked. After the vacation, upon their return to Vegas, Alan had been more promiscuous than before. He seemed determined, driven, to take a poke at anything in skirts. In fact, it was almost as if the car trip had somehow pushed him over the edge, for the number and intensity of his one-night stands developed a manic quality of frightening desperation. 3 months later, in October of that year, he walked out on her and Marcy. The only good thing about the car trip had been the brief encounter with that young woman doctor who had been driving cross-country from Stanford to Boston on, she'd said, her first vacation ever. Georgia still remembered the woman's name, Ginger Weiss. Although they had met only once, and then for a little more than an hour, Ginger Weiss had quite unwittingly changed Georgia's life. The doctor had been so very young, so slender, pretty, feminine. It had been difficult to accept that she was really a doctor, yet she'd been uncommonly self-assured and competent. Deeply impressed by Ginger Weiss during that encounter, Georgia was later motivated by the doctor's example. She'd always thought of herself as a born cocktail waitress and capable of anything more challenging. But when Ellen walked out, she had remembered Dr. Weiss and decided to make more of herself than she had previously thought possible. During the past 11 months, Georgia had taken business management courses at UNLV, squeezing them into an already hectic schedule. When she finished paying the bills that Alan had left her, she would build a nest egg so she could eventually open her own business, a dress shop. She had worked out a very detailed plan, revising and honing it until it was realistic, and she knew she would stick with it. It was a shame that she would never have a chance to thank Ginger Weiss. Of course, it was not any favor that Dr. Weiss had performed that so deeply affected Georgia. It was not so much what the doctor had done as what she was. Anyway, at 27, Georgia's prospects were more exciting than they had been previously. Now she turned off Desert Inn Road onto Pawnee Drive, a street of comfortable homes behind the Boulevard Mall. She stopped in front of Kara Persagian's house and got out of the car. The front door opened before she reached it, and Marcy rushed out into her arms, shouting happily, "Mommy, Mommy!" And Georgia was at last able to forget about her job, the Texan, the argument with the pit boss, and the dilapidated condition of the Chevette. She squatted down and hugged her daughter. When all else failed to cheer her, she could count on Marcy for a lift. "Mommy," the girl said, "did you have a great day?" "Yes, honey, I did. You smell like peanut butter." "Cookies. Aunt Kara made peanut butter cookies. I had a great day, too." "Mommy, do you know why elephants came, why they came all the way from Africa to live in this country?" Marcy giggled. "'Cause we got orchestras here and elephants just love to dance." She giggled again. "Isn't that silly?" Even allowing for maternal prejudice, Georgia knew that Marcy was an adorable child. The girl had her mother's hair, so dark brown that it was virtually black, and her mother's dusky complexion. Her eyes were a striking contrast to the rest of her, not brown like Georgia's, but blue like her father's. She had an immensely appealing gamma and quality. Marcy's huge eyes opened wide. "Hey, know what day it is?" "I sure do. Almost Christmas Eve." "Will be soon as it's dark. Aunt Kara's giving us cookies to take home. You know, Santa's already left the North Pole, and he started going down chimneys already, but in other parts of the world, of course, where it's dark. Not chimneys here." "Aunt Kara says I've been so bad all year, I'll only get a necklace made out of coal, but she's just teasing. Isn't she just teasing, Mommy?" "Just teasing," Georgia confirmed. "Oh, no, I'm not," Kara Persagian said. She came through the doorway onto the front walk, a grandmotherly woman in a house dress and apron, a coal necklace, and maybe a set of matching coal earrings. Marcy giggled again. Kara was not Marcy's aunt, merely her after-school babysitter. Marcy called her Aunt Kara from the second week she knew her, and the sitter was obviously delighted by that affectionately bestowed honorary title. Kara was carrying Marcy's jacket, a big coloring book picture of Santa that they had been working on for a few days, and a plate of cookies. Georgia gave the picture and jacket to Marcy, accepted the cookies with expressions of gratitude, and with some chatter about diets. And then Kara said, "Georgia, could I speak with you a moment, just the two of us?" "Sure." Georgia sent Marcy to the car with the cookies and turned inquisitively to Kara. "It's about Marcy. What's she done?" Oh, nothing bad. She's an angel, that one. Couldn't misbehave if she tried. But today, well, she was talking about how the thing she wants most for Christmas is that Little Miss Doctor play kit. It's the first time she's ever really nagged me about a toy, Georgia said. I don't know why she's obsessed with it. She talks about it every day. You are getting it for her? Georgia glanced at the Chevette, confirming that Marcy was out of earshot, then smiled. Yes, Santa definitely has it in his bag. Good. She'd be heartbroken if you didn't. But the oddest thing happened today, and it made me wonder if she'd ever been seriously ill. Serious illness? No, she's an exceptionally healthy kid. Never been in the hospital? No, why? Kara frowned. Well, today she started talking about the Little Miss Doctor kit, and she told me she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up because then she could treat herself when she got sick. She said she never wanted a doctor to touch her again because she was once hurt real bad by doctors. I asked her what she meant, and she got quiet for a while, and I thought she wasn't going to answer me. Then finally, in this very somber voice, she said some doctors had once strapped her down in a hospital bed so she couldn't get out, and they stuck her full of needles and flashlights in her face and did all sorts of horrible things to her. She said they hurt her real bad, so she was going to become her own doctor and treat herself from now on. Really? Well, it's not true, Georgia said. I don't know why she'd make up such a story. That is odd. Oh, that's not the odd part. When she told me all this, I was concerned. I was surprised you'd never told me. I mean, if she'd been seriously ill, I ought to have been told in case there was a possibility of a recurrence. So I questioned her about it, just casually, the way you coax things out of a child. And suddenly the poor little thing just burst into tears. We were in the kitchen making cookies, and she started to cry and shake, just shaking like a leaf. I tried to calm her, but that only made her cry harder. Then she pulled away from me and ran. I found her in the living room in the corner behind the big green lazy boy, huddled down as if she were hiding from someone. Good heavens, Georgia said. Kara said it took me at least 5 minutes to get her to stop crying and another 10 to coax her out of her hidey hole behind that chair. She made me promise, if those doctors ever came for her again, that I'd let her hide behind the chair and not tell them where she was. I mean, Georgia, she was in a real state. On the way home, Georgia said, that was some story you told Kara. What story? Marcy asked, looking straight ahead, barely able to see over the dashboard. That story about the doctors. Oh, being strapped in bed. Why'd you make up a thing like that? It's true, Marcy said. But it isn't. Yes, it is. The girl's voice was little more than a whisper. The only hospital you were ever in was the one where you were born, and I'm sure you don't remember that, Georgia sighed. A few months ago we had a little talk about fibbing. Remember what happened to Danny Duck when he fibbed? The truth fairy wouldn't let him go to the woodchuck's party. That's right. Fibbing's bad, Marcy said softly. Nobody likes fibbers, especially not woodchucks and squirrels. Disarmed, Georgia had to bite back a laugh and struggle to keep a stern tone in her voice. Nobody likes fibbers. They stopped at a red traffic light, but Marcy still looked straight ahead, refusing to meet Georgia's eyes. The girl said it's especially bad to fib to your mommy or your daddy, or to anyone who cares about you. And making up stories to scare Kara, that's the same as fibbing. I wasn't trying to scare her, Marcy said. Trying to get sympathy then. You were never in a hospital. Was. Oh, yeah? Marcy nodded vigorously and Georgia said, when? Don't remember when. You don't remember, huh? Almost. Almost isn't good enough. Where was this hospital? I'm not sure. Sometimes I remember it better than other times. Sometimes I can hardly remember it at all. And sometimes I remember it real good, and then I I get scared. Right now you don't remember too well, huh? Nope, but today I remember real good and scared myself. The traffic light changed and Georgia drove in silence, wondering how best to handle the situation. She had no notion what to make of it. It was foolish ever to believe that you understood your child. Marcy had always been able to surprise Georgia with actions, statements, big ideas, musings, and questions that seemed not to have come from within herself, but which it seemed she had carefully selected from some secret book of startling behavior that was known to all kids but not to adults. Some cosmic volume, perhaps titled Keeping Mom and Dad Off Balance. As if she had just dipped into that book again, Marcy said, "Why were all Santa Claus's kids deformed?" What? Well, see, Santa and Mrs. Claus had a whole bunch of kids, but all of them was elves. The elves aren't their children, they work for Santa. Really? How much does he pay them? He doesn't pay them anything, honey. How do they buy food then? They don't have to buy anything. Santa gives them all they need. This was certainly the last Christmas that Marcy would believe in Santa. Nearly all of her classmates were already doubters. Recently she had been asking these probing questions. Georgia would be sorry to see the fantasy disproved, the magic lost. The elves are part of his family, honey, and they work with him simply for the love of it. You mean the elves are adopted, so Santa doesn't have real kids of his own? That's sad. No, 'cause he's got all the elves to love. God, I love this kid, Georgia thought. Thank you, God. Thank you for this kid. Even if I did have to get tied up with Alan Rykoff to get her. Dark clouds and silver linings. She turned into the 2-lane driveway that encircled Las Huevos apartments and parked the Chevette in the 4th carport. Las Huevos, the eggs. After 5 years in the place, she still couldn't understand why anyone would name an apartment complex the Eggs. The instant the car stopped, Marcy was out of it with the poster from the coloring book and the plate of cookies, dashing up the walkway to their entrance. The girl had deftly changed the subject just long enough to finish the ride and escape from the confines of the car. Georgia wondered if she should press the issue farther. It was Christmas Eve, and she had no desire to spoil the holiday. Marcy was a good kid, better than most, and this business about being hurt by doctors was an extremely rare instance of fabrication. Georgia had made the point that fibbing was not acceptable, and Marcy had understood, even if she had persisted a bit with her medical fantasy. And her sudden change of subject had probably been an admission of wrongdoing. So it was an aberration. Nothing would be gained by harping on it, especially not at the risk of ruining Christmas. Georgia was confident she would hear no more about it.